So the deadline is fast approaching for third party, and I still don't have a name, but I'm close, and I need to be aligned with a lot of people. I'm freaking out a little bit, but I'm confident that I'm going to get there just in time to have that third party on the ballot in November. My name is Dave Kerpen, and I am the candidate.
What does it really take to run for local office? On The Candidate, we're pulling back the curtain on the messy, expensive, and sometimes bizarre world of local politics. Join us as we share the unfiltered truth about what happens before you see those campaign signs pop up in your neighborhood. I'm your host, Jess Milanes. We're following serial entrepreneur Dave Kerpen as he dives headfirst into the world of local politics. Ready for a change in the world? This is your opportunity to be the candidate.
Jess, good to see you again.
Good to see you. Season 2, episode 1. It has been a couple weeks since we last recorded, and a lot has happened. The Mets officially started baseball.
Baseball season has started. Thanks for following. Also, Jess, you know, we just did not, in season 1, we did not properly introduce you, I feel. So, as all of our season 1 listeners know, I'm running for office, and I'm a serial entrepreneur and author, and taking a stab at politics here in local office, running for town supervisor of the town of North Hempstead, the 5th largest town in America. But Jess, I think the listeners want to know about you, my producer, my friend, an expert in podcasting. Tell the listeners a little bit about you, Jess.
Oh, goodness. Okay. My background is actually in project management. And one of my really great skill sets is actually taking very big concepts and breaking them down into smaller, actionable, bite-sized pieces. And I'm really good at translating techie talk to layman talk. And I got into podcasting because I needed to find my voice when I was going through infertility. Gosh, 6 years ago now? Wild. Fell in love with podcasting, fell in love with the medium. I love people. And then almost 3 years ago to the day, I started my podcasting agency, Smart Podcast Solutions, and I help people launch and produce their podcast and build really powerful personal brand and story arcs that help to amplify their voice.
Amazing. And you have been a wonderful producer for this podcast. So, of course, I highly recommend, Jessica, to anyone that's listening and looking for some help with podcasting. You mentioned infertility, and I know you have a beautiful daughter. So I guess that worked, or was this the second time that you were trying?
So it was actually our first time. We had been trying for 3 years unsuccessfully. I felt like I needed to build a community around myself because in 2019, infertility was not talked about as much as it is today. And so I built a podcast called Real Talk Women's Health and Fertility. And the whole point behind it was to build a community around women's health and openly share experiences. And had, quite frankly, a runaway success and became really well known within the infertility community. And then 6 months after that show, we were told that we would never get pregnant naturally. And IVF was off the table for us. And then by the grace of God, my daughter was conceived naturally. And we found out 30 days later. She was born at 29 weeks gestation in May of 2020. So she was a preemie. We have been through the ringer, but she is now a very happy, healthy little girl who is going to kindergarten this fall. And I am so proud to be her mom.
Well, that's amazing. And I know we didn't plan this, but I appreciate your sharing on your vulnerability. And now I got to go back and listen to this podcast, because I may be a dad, but we actually struggled years ago. I don't know if you knew this, but Carrie and I struggled. After our first 2, we had a couple of miscarriages, and we struggled. And then years later, of course, our third was born. They're all my pride and joy, but you know, Seth's my little angel here at age 9. Okay, well, when last we left off, we were trying to figure out what that third party would look like. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, we haven't gotten like officially there, but I'll tell you what we're looking at and why. I don't think it was a name that we talked about before. We're looking at the moderate party. And the reason is that we've tested a bunch. And, you know, as proud as I am to be Jewish and pro-Israel, and as much as I wanted that to be part of my identity, there's an argument that anyone that's followed me anywhere at any point already knows that. And there's an argument that it does run the risk of alienating the anti-Semitic vote, but also just really alienating people that don't want to choose somebody just based on their identity, and like identity politics on both sides of the aisle are a little silly, I think. And we talk. I think I may have talked about lowering taxes or other sort of traditionally Republican aspects that I'm going to do. But ultimately, the reason we settled on moderate as the likely choice is that in talking to people on both sides of the aisle, people are so fed up with the extremes. And they're so fed up with having to choose a candidate who might be, a super MAGA right winger or a super, progressive radical liberal. And they just don't want to identify with either. They really don't. And I think a lot of fear and distaste for maybe the left side of that spectrum has pushed people to the Republican side when they don't really necessarily agree with the far right wing ideology. And I'll say it, the Trump, sort of like MAGA. It's not even ideology, the Trump stuff. It's sort of beyond ideology, I guess. And a lot of Republicans don't love what's happening in Washington. And so the idea behind moderate is remind people there is another way. And there are candidates out there, and I would most definitely put myself in that category, who are an extreme. And I'm probably a fiscal conservative, frankly, and a social liberal. And it's that combination. Yeah, I'm running on the Democrat line, but I'm not that left-wing progressive radical that the Republicans would have me be. And I'm not the liberal that a lot of Democrats wish I were, but I really am in the middle. And so that's where moderate comes in. And we're hoping that that's a signal that tells people that don't know me already that there is a choice, that, you can, because most people are pretty moderate on both sides of the aisle.
Yeah.
So yeah, we still have some final touches to do there, and some testing, etc. But that's kind of where we landed, and it's really scary because it's a big deal, right? Like a lot of people. I asked my consultants. I said, realistically, and I know you're biased because like your job is to like make sure everyone know who I am. But how many people go into the ballot box not knowing really anything about either candidate? Probably 60%.
I think that's a low estimate. I would imagine the average American probably does no research and just looks at R or D, or I like this person's name.
Yeah. Sad but true. And if that is the case, this third party becomes literally a third piece of data for people to choose from. So now, if they go in knowing nothing, now they know D and they know this new third line. And so we're betting that moderate is the line that will generate the most. First of all, it's honest, and second of all, it'll generate the most potential converts from an R. And it won't. We don't think it'll lose Democrats. I mean, it's hard to imagine somebody that was planning on voting for me, seeing that I'm also on the moderate line and then voting for a Republican. I guess unless they're super progressive radical, and I don't need those votes. I don't, I want those votes. I want all the votes I can get, but I want people to know who they're voting for, and they're not voting for somebody who's going to be a radical.
So one of the things that we talked about in the last episode was with this new third party, it was going to be very identity centric, but we are shifting that, it sounds like. But one of the things that you had mentioned is you were going to interview and be very selective on who was going to be this third party on this third party ticket. Can you talk a little bit more about how that's shifted, since it's no longer what you had envisioned from our last episode, and it's more speaking to your moderate versus your Jewish identity?
Yeah, so we have to figure this out, because if every Democrat runs on the moderate line, then it's not really a moderate line. But I imagine most Democrats will want to run on the moderate line. Frankly, there might be some Republicans that want to run on the moderate line. There's some real work to be done to evaluate folks to make sure that they belong on the moderate line. And that's important for credibility. It's important for credibility. So we'll have to determine some criteria. I haven't figured it out, to be frank. We have to determine some criteria that on positions and plans that that helps to categorize folks as, moderate or not. And my guess is a bunch of the candidates will be, on the moderate line. I don't think we would do it. It's a lot of work. I mean, we have to go get petitions and get, thousands more signatures here. It's a lot of work. So, let's say there's 50 people on the ballot in all of Nassau County, Long Island, 50 Democrats rather. We might have, maybe half of them might be on the moderate line, right? So, and the good news, bad news is, with it being involved beyond the town of North Hempstead and the whole county, ultimately, of course, I have a say about myself and my campaign, but those outside of my town, I have, of course, a lot less of a say. So it's a bit of a balancing act and a tightrope. But I think ultimately, I like the moderate line. And so long as we can establish credibility, to your point, and make sure that not everyone's like on it automatically, maybe we'll see if if other folks are planning on cutting taxes the way I am. And I don't know. We'll have to determine some criteria. But now I got to go. Now, once we go all in on moderate, then we have to repeat the entire process of collecting petitions and signatures, which we just completed. Yesterday we submitted all of our petitions
Oh,
to get my name on the
congratulations.
ballot. Yeah, thank you. So I'm officially the Democratic nominee for town supervisor of the town of North Hempstead. We needed 2,000 signatures. We got 4,600. So I feel really proud and really, really grateful. Like over 80 of volunteers went out to get the signatures. And there's something really, so this is my first time ever doing this. I'm admitted, I feel a little guilty. I wish I had done it before for other candidates, but again, just to be honest, I hadn't. So there was something really amazing about it. It just feels like you're participating in democracy, right? It feels like you're making a difference. And so to anyone listening, you don't have to be a candidate to go out and help friends and neighbors get on local ballots. So yeah, I went out 5 different times with 5 different partners. Sometimes people go alone, but they recommend people go with a partner, especially candidates. And it was an amazing experience. Amazing. I walked a lot in Port Washington, in my area of the town, and I was really, really excited by how many people already knew who I was, already knew that I was running. People, like random people I had met through the years, through school stuff with some of my kids, etc. I met people who were planning on now, are giving me money, which is amazing, So
Fantastic.
yeah, really, really exciting. I had some door slams, which is hard, but I've been an entrepreneur, so I've had many, many door slams over the years. Not necessarily literal door slams before, but certainly figurative door slams in the past, and it's always a bummer. One thing I found really, really interesting was the disparity of wealth, and when I went to to New Hyde Park, to another section of town, mostly a lot of immigrants, a lot of working class folks, I was amazed by the difference in reception. So in my affluent town of Port Washington, it was hey Dave, great to meet you, Dave, welcome, come on in, can I give you some coffee? And of course I always take the coffee. And but I got a lot more door slams, a lot of no, not interested, get away. My wife thought one interesting theory was that especially immigrants were actually nervous about people coming to the door with like papers to sign, and like, given the climate, right, in the world today, that folks even, we only knocked on registered Democrats' houses, but maybe another
But it's
family
so
member.
scary.
Yeah, it's scary, and it was just a really, really sober reminder, and also frankly inspiring to me, right? That that I will be hopefully governing, not just the affluent people in my neighborhood, but the entire town, which is super, super diverse, and, full of so many people from so many different backgrounds. So that was a really awesome aspect of petitioning, if difficult at times. And then probably my favorite story, which will lean very well towards next episode, towards segueing towards next episode. So I'll try to end it with a cliffhanger here. I'm not a very conventional person in many ways. So when I went door knocking for signatures for petitions in Port Washington, at least, not in New Hyde Park, interestingly enough, but in Port Washington, a lot of folks had Ring doorbells, and I guess some Ring doorbells you could leave a voicemail. And back in the day, I used to leave singing voicemails when I worked in radio sales, and much to my partner's shock, when I got a ring. I got a
can only imagine where this is going and what your partner did.
Yeah. No, she definitely was. Amelia was a lovely, lovely woman, probably a little older. Yeah, a little older than me and a little more socially conservative. She was definitely shocked when I began singing. The woman's name was Donna. So, I happen to know a lot of songs and with different, names, and Oh Donna, great song. So I sang like Oh Donna, but I changed the lyrics on the fly to, wish you were home so you could sign my petition, etc. And the amazing thing, Jess, is that I got a Facebook message the next day. She had looked me up, found me on Facebook, said, I loved your voicemail. If you come back, I'd be happy to sign, your petition. And it's like, I got a signature, but more important, I got a voter and potentially like somebody that's going to be connected with me and tell that story like for life, right? And so the risk is people think I'm a crazy person, but the reward is strengthening relationships that will hopefully last like a lifetime. Maybe Donna will tell all of her friends, and maybe that'll be 100 votes. Who knows, right? So it was when I got that Facebook message, it was like so motivating and got me really, really excited. And in the next episode, Jess, I'm going to talk about just how to lean in to not only singing voicemails, but being unconventional and standing out.
Can't wait. All right. Well, thank you again so much, Dave. And thank you to all of our listeners. We are back for season 2, episode 1. And stay tuned for next week's episode 2 of season 2.
Like, subscribe, share, review. Thank you.
Yes. Bye. Paid for by the friends of Dave Kirpin. Thanks for going behind the scenes with us on The Candidate. If you enjoyed getting the real story about running for office, take a moment to rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. Your support means the world to us. See you next time.